The Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus just released 2 out of the 8 episodes of Season 2. Season 2 adopts the second book of PJO, or the Sea of Monsters, and it's finally here. After months and months of teasers and news, we finally have this new season, and its first 2 episodes are amazing. I personally think that this show is starting off really strong, and in this video, I'll be giving my thoughts and analysis of the episodes so far. Obviously, there will be spoilers following this, so you've been warned. And with that, let's get started. Episode 1 is entitled I Played Dodgeball with Cannibals, and it's actually chapter 2 of the Sea of Monsters book. This episode starts off with Grover in a forest, which we saw shots of in the official teaser and trailer of Season 2. We see Grover trying to find the god of the wild Pan, which is very accurate to how he left Grover's character in Season 1. But in the previous season, Grover had received the Searcher's license, and that meant he was allowed to look for Pan, and Grover's now in this forest because of that quest. In his search, he stumbled upon the skeleton with the Pan pipes. I've already stated this in my previous video, but I'm saying it again. These pan pipes are the same pipes Grover uses throughout the books during a fight. We never really got an origin story for them, so I like how we got an introduction of them here in this scene. I like that it's a sign from Pan, and I think it just makes a lot more sense for Grover's character. Also, I love how they kept their nature powers. I can't really play the scene because of copyright, so I'll try to describe it instead. Once Grover placed the pipes, vines immediately attack Luke's group of demigods who were actually spying on Grover this entire time. And speaking of these demigods, let's talk about them. They're led by someone who was not from the books at all, and her name is Allison Sims. I made a video months ago discussing her character, so you can check it out if you want more context. But just to make it quick, Allison is a demigod daughter of Apollo, and she's described as a Camp Half-Blood graduate, or adult demigod, who believes in Kronos and allies herself with Luke Castellan. In my video on Allison Sims, I mentioned how I was really surprised with this description, because a lot of Greek demigods die so young, so Allison surviving as an adult demigod is a really rare case. But going back, Grover recognizes Allison and quickly realizes that she's part of Luke's army of demigods. Allison then did something pretty intriguing. She reached over and took a thread of something off of Grover, and we can pause right there. Just to note, this scene never happened in the book, which is why this confused a lot of people, even book fans too. However, I was able to catch up on what's happening in the scene, so I'll explain it here to make things more clear. In the Sea of Monsters book, Luke was trying to find the Golden Fleece, or a magical artifact that can heal anything, and he wants to use this to heal Kronos, who is currently this rock that we saw in the trailer. Kronos looks like this because Zeus chopped him up and threw him into Tartarus, and ever since then, Kronos wanted to be restored to his full power, which is why he needs the Golden Fleece to heal him. Because of this, Luke has been trying to find the Golden Fleece, and in the show, it seems like he ordered Allison and the rest of these demigods to do this. Now that I've explained that, let's talk about how Grover fits here. As mentioned earlier, Grover was trying to find Pan, but Pan's energy is similar to the Golden Fleece, which is why Grover thought he found Pan, when in fact he didn't. His search led him to the Golden Fleece, and one of its threads was the one Allison took from Grover in this scene. And now you're all caught up, let's continue the episode. After Allison realizes that Grover did not have the fleece, they proceed to attack him. And again, I unfortunately can't play the scene, but Grover plays his pipes, and suddenly, vines attack the demigods. Once again, pretty accurate to how the pipes worked in the book as well. After this, Grover walks out and gets taken by a tentacle monster, which we know as Skyla. There's no explanation about this monster so far, so I think we'll get formally introduced to her later on in the show. From this opening scene with Grover, let's talk about Percy's part of the story. The premise is pretty much the same from the book. It narrates how Percy gets up from school, but they change something pretty big from the book. They introduce us to Tyson, who has been living with them for a while now. And what's surprising about this scene is that Percy and Sally both know that Tyson is a Cyclops. This is very different in the book. In the book, it's explained that the Mist managed to cover Tyson's single eye so much that even some demigods like Percy wouldn't have seen it, and Percy only realizes that Tyson is a Cyclops much later in the book. Not gonna lie, I was kinda sad with this change because a huge part of the book was Percy coming to terms with the fact that he was related to a Cyclops. And even if we do see Percy feel kind of embarrassed by Tyson a lot of times in these first 2 episodes, the book made it feel more real because Percy did not know that Tyson was a Cyclops for a good majority of the time. Learning the truth was like getting a slap to the face, And added to how people messed with Percy because of being related to Tyson, it made Percy feel ashamed of Tyson before Percy grew to truly appreciate Tyson by the end of the book. This was an amazing character development in the book, so I'm kind of disappointed that it didn't really include it anymore. I mean, I kind of get it though. It would add more screen time, and they're juggling a lot more plot ideas already, so it's a right decision to speed things up. But I don't know. I guess a part of me still wishes to see Percy come to terms with a Cyclops brother just like in the book. But anyway, we also meet Sally Jackson, or Percy's mother, who mentions how she had a mysterious dream. This dream involved a golden drachma, with a trident or Poseidon symbol, and a scythe or Kronos' symbol. These two symbols were on different sides of the same coin, and it's actually pretty symbolic to Percy and Luke. I've mentioned this in my previous character analysis on Luke, but I'll say it again here. Luke and Percy are really similar. Both are the golden boys of Camp Half-Blood, both are incredible swordsmen, and both are demigods who were wronged by the gods multiple times. They're both on the same coin, but as Percy chose the good side with the trident, Luke fell into the darkness of the scythe. After this, Percy and Tyson walk to school, and we get a pretty nice conversation. One detail that never appears in the book is the idea that Tyson always wanted to go to Camp Half-Blood. In the original story, Percy never tells Tyson that he's a demigod, so he has no reason to explain the mythological world to him. However, the show made Tyson aware of the mythological world, and as they talk, he mentions how his mother was a naiad. A naiad in Greek mythology and Percy Jackson lore is a water nymph, and it's pretty much just like the book. As they talk, we got the scene from the special look that Disney Plus gave us a few days ago, and it's the scene with Percy, Tyson, and Annabeth. Percy and Tyson are walking down a street when suddenly the Grey Sisters taxi arrives. Almost instantly, Tyson picked Percy up, and I just love this scene because it really showed just how much Tyson loved Percy. In a recent interview with Daniel Dimer, or Tyson's actor, Daniel mentioned how they added this protector persona for Tyson, and it's really seen in scenes like this. Going back to the episode though, Percy and Tyson realize that the taxi stopped because Annabeth jumped out, and she immediately tells Tyson to put Percy down. Annabeth is pretty cool to Tyson in this scene because to her, he was a Cyclops or a monster, and she had a very bad experience with Cyclopses in the past. And then, we had this pretty nice conversation. I just went through this in my previous video, but I'm gonna say it again. I loved how Tyson mentioned that Percy looks at Annabeth's picture all the time.
Tyson? Yes. You look at a picture all the time, right?
Because that's a detail straight from the book. Percy received a photo of Annabeth, and he always kept it with him. In response to what Tyson said, Percy proceeded to change the topic and ask about Grover instead, but Annabeth also brings up the situation in Camp Half-Blood. And then, the scene shifts to them riding the Grey Sisters taxi, and this scene was pretty accurate. The Grey Sisters look incredible, and I absolutely love Kristen Shaw's Grey Sister. It also cracked me up that Kristen Shaw's Grey Sister was insisting that Percy or Grover was Annabeth's boyfriend.
Your boyfriend, huh? I never said boyfriend.
Especially when she thought that Grover was the other boyfriend. And Percy kind of looks at Annabeth like, there's another boyfriend? But anyway, Percy also continues to ask the Grey Sisters where Grover is, and it's exactly like the book. They give Percy coordinates, and it's the location of the Sea of Monsters, which is actually around the Bermuda Triangle. After this, we arrive at Camp Half-Blood, and we get the scene with the Laestrygonian giants that we keep seeing in the teasers. However, as I mentioned before, this fight with the giants happened in Merryweather Prep, and not on the way to camp like this, but they made an interesting detail about this attack. After the last Laestrygonian giant is killed by Clarisse, which is a pretty cool scene with her spear, Annabeth, being the war strategist she is, quickly deduces that something was up. Apparently, the giants attacked as a distraction because Luke was poisoning Thalia's tree. This is actually a really cool idea that I did not expect, and I guess they just decided to do this to quicken up the pace, which I really appreciate. We then get the scene with Luke leaving and them realizing Thalia's tree is poisoned, before we see our first scene of Tantalus. Tantalus is the new activities director after Chiron got framed up for poisoning Thalia's tree, and he's pretty brutal. He orders to kill Tyson on the spot just because he's a monster, and before Clarisse and her demigods can do so, Tyson is claimed by Poseidon, meaning Tyson is Percy's half-brother. The next scene after that is Mr. D laughing at Percy, which cracked me up too because this is exactly how he would mock Percy as well in the book. This is because in the book, It's clear that many people were gossiping about Percy because he was related to a Cyclops and therefore a monster. We also got a scene with Tantalus, who explains the chariot races, and it's pretty much like in the book. However, Tantalus did something that shocked me. As he argued with Percy, he said that he didn't like Percy's tone and sent him to cabin confinement, which is just wild. This never happened in the book, but it does make sense because Tantalus was pretty much a tyrant king. He hated his life because of his punishment from Zeus, and he took out his anger and frustration to people like Percy and Annabeth. Going back though, we see the Poseidon cabin with Tyson inside, and we get a pretty sad moment of Percy accidentally saying that they aren't bros. Percy stops himself after he says it, and this is the filmmaker showing how Percy feels conflicted about being related to Tyson. Again, I would feel like this scene would hit harder if Percy didn't know that Tyson was a Cyclops beforehand, but either way, I like the scene. We also get a pretty interesting moment between Percy and Annabeth. They actually have a bit of an argument, and let me explain. Over the summer, Percy and Annabeth had exchanged letters, and one of them actually attached this photo of Annabeth we see in Percy's bedroom in an earlier shot. I forgot to point it out earlier, so I'm saying it here. Although they exchanged letters, they also kept some things secret. Percy wasn't able to tell Annabeth about Tyson living with them, while Annabeth wasn't able to tell him about her life with her family. This is an intriguing part of the show that the book kind of mentioned. We learn that Annabeth secretly didn't enjoy her time with her family, and she didn't know how to tell Percy that through the letters. But after this, we also get this really heartbreaking scene. Annabeth walks over to Thalia's tree and just sits there, crying about the situation. Annabeth mentions how Thalia was the only person Annabeth could talk to most of the time. And it's so sad because Thalia is literally a tree. But at the same time, you have to remember that Thalia was once a person. She was practically family to Annabeth and was willing to die for her friends, even if one of those friends would go on to poison her. Like, I don't know about you guys, but this scene just killed me. After this, we get one of the last scenes of the first episode. Percy's dream with Grover. And I love everything about this. We get the explanation of the empathy link, and it's pretty much just like in the book. We also realize that Skyla gave Polyphemus Grover, and it's a detail that wasn't in the book, because in the book it was just Polyphemus this entire time. Either way though, it plays out the same. Grover explains how he's trapped in the cave with Polyphemus, and also mentions the Golden Fleece. Grover also gives the same coordinates that the Grey Sisters gave to Percy in the taxi, and by the end of the episode, Percy realizes that Grover is in the Sea of Monsters. And he believes that they could get the Golden Fleece to save Thalia's tree. And that's how the episode ends. Overall, this was a great start to Season 2. I'd honestly rate this episode a 9.8 out of 10. It's pretty good, and now, let's go to Episode 2. Episode 2 is entitled Demon Pigeons Attack, which is actually Chapter 6 of the Sea of Monsters. This episode starts off with this shot of Stymphalian birds, and they try to break through the barrier but can't. However, as we know in the book, they eventually do enter camp. But for now, let's continue with the episode. After this, we get a scene of Percy and Annabeth, and they're clearly planning something together. Percy distracts Tantalus to allow Annabeth in his office, and she sneaks around to make an iris message to Chiron. Annabeth had to talk to Chiron for advice about the Golden Fleece, and once Chiron picks it up, I love how he's clearly in the middle of a party. This is because the Sea of Monsters also introduced us to Chiron's family, who are centaurs known as the Party Ponies. Chiron and Annabeth talk about the Golden Fleece, and Chiron agreed that a quest had to be made to find the fleece and save camp. Annabeth tells him she'll tell Percy about it, but Chiron surprisingly disagrees. Now, this is when this episode kind of gets controversial, because Chiron told Annabeth that Percy should not join the quest. I reread the book to remember if this scene actually happened, because I was sure that this was not in the book, and I was right. This was never in the original story, so for a while, I didn't really get why Rick and the gang would add this, but I now understood why. And for this, I'll get context. In the Sea of Monsters book, we see Chiron gathering his things before revealing that he got fired by Zeus. Chiron also talked about this quest to Annabeth in the scene, but told Annabeth to keep Percy safe at all costs. Chiron was very serious about this command, to the point that he even made Annabeth swear in the river Styx that she would keep Percy safe, which Annabeth agreed to. This is because of the Great Prophecy, or the prophecy that connects the entire Percy Jackson series. Chiron told Annabeth about this prophecy because he foresaw that she would play a big role in it. This prophecy talks about a demigod child of the Big Three, aka Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, who would one day destroy or save Olympus once they turned 16. Because of this, the three gods made a pact to never sire any more demigod children. But as of this time in the series, we all know that Zeus and Poseidon broke that oath because Zeus had Thalia and Poseidon had Percy. However, Thalia got stuck in time as a pine tree, and this meant that she couldn't be the prophesied demigod because she would never turn 16. With Thalia out of the picture, that left Percy himself. Percy might be the demigod of the prophecy, and that's why Chiron wants Annabeth to protect Percy at all costs in the book. Percy might be the demigod who would either destroy or save Olympus, and that also explains why in the previous season, Kronos once told Percy that Percy will be the key to Kronos' return. Kronos is gambling on the idea that Percy will destroy Olympus for him, and Chiron wants to prevent that at all costs, which is why he's trusting Annabeth to take care of Percy. In the show, this translated to Chiron telling Annabeth that Percy can't come on the quest. In Chiron's eyes, this would keep Percy safe and away from Kronos, who could manipulate Percy. And I know, that took a lot of lore to explain, but I hope I cleared that up. Anyway, as Chiron had made her promise, it was clear that Annabeth was trying to get Percy out of the quest in a subtle way, which led to them splitting up into different teams for the chariot race. Not gonna lie, I kind of like this change because it removed the original idea of them getting into a fight about Tyson, so this change feels more serious compared to that. Anyway, the chariot race scene happens, and it's exactly how I imagined it. The chariots themselves look amazing, and Clarisse's chariot looks pretty book accurate. Speaking of Clarisse, we also got a moment with her and Chris Rodriguez. If you've read the books, then you would know that Clarisse and Chris end up together in The Last Olympian, and seeing them plant the seeds of their relationship here in season 2 is pretty good. We know that Clarisse had a crush on Chris for a while, and it could start around this time. Chris is a demigod son of Hermes, and he plays a bigger role later on in the series. He actually sides with Luke, so I'm curious about how they'll handle this in the show. As the chariot race ends, the Stymphalian birds swoop in and attack the campers, which is, again, exactly like the book. I love this scene. As they swarm around, Clarisse continues with the chariot race, and that's pretty much what she did as well in the book. She technically won the race, even if it wasn't supposed to count because of the monster attack, and I like that they kept this detail. After the birds flew away because of a Mariah Carey song, no, I'm not kidding, that's actually what happened. Percy and the rest end up having a meeting with Tantalus to discuss the camp situation, and Tantalus is forced to admit the truth. Thalia's tree has been poisoned, and that it would completely die by the next week, which is why they needed a quest to save the camp. Like in the book, Tantalus chooses Clarisse to the job, which even Clarisse is shocked at, and that's exactly like the book as well. Even Clarisse didn't think she deserved it, but since she technically won the race earlier, Tantalus believed that she was the best camper for the quest. Now, this is when things get a bit different from the book again. Tantalus tells Clarisse that she gets to pick 2 other people to her quest, and surprisingly, she was okay with picking Annabeth. I had to pause here because I don't really find this realistic at all. Clarisse and Annabeth do not like each other, especially since Annabeth always sided with Percy, who was the one who broke Clarisse's spear, and even embarrassed her in that bathroom scene fight in the previous book and season. Like, for me, there is no way Clarisse would say yes to Annabeth like in this scene, and come to think of it, this entire choose your 2 other members wasn't really a thing for Clarisse in the book. She went on this quest alone because she had a ship full of undead warriors from her father. In her eyes, she didn't need friends, but I would still agree to her picking Chris Rodriguez here because she obviously likes him. Still though, I just really can't picture her saying yes to Annabeth. That's kind of like the only gripe that I have so far with the show, but anyway, we shift to this scene of Percy talking to Tyson. Percy explains that he didn't get the quest, and Tyson feels bad for Percy. Percy tries to sleep it off, but ends up getting a nightmare again about Grover. Grover talks about Polyphemus and how this Cyclops thinks that Grover is actually his Cyclops bride, and it shifts to the wedding dress. I absolutely love that they kept this detail because Grover's wedding dress was an iconic part of the Sea of Monsters. After this, Percy wakes up and realizes that he needs to act soon to save Grover and the camp. He walks outside, and just like the book, he ends up bumping into Hermes, the god of thieves and travelers, or Luke's father. In the books, this is the first time we meet Hermes, but this was different in the show as we already met him in episode 6 in season 1. I mentioned in my old review that I liked Hermes' addition enough, but I just don't think it impacted much. For me, Hermes could have been introduced here just like in the book, but either way, I like how book accurate this scene was with Hermes. I also like how Percy insists that Luke can't be saved, which is exactly what Percy believes throughout the books as well. He tries to argue with Hermes like in the book, but Hermes kept reiterating, "He's my son." It's so heartbreaking yet accurate to what he feels about Luke, and I just love it. On the other hand, I'm also really sad that we didn't get to see Martha and George, or the twin snakes on Hermes' Caduceus phone. I don't know, that was a really cool scene in the book to me, but either way, this scene is pretty much just the same, as Hermes gives Percy the same materials from the book, which I'm really excited to see Percy and the gang use them later on. After this, we see the Princess Andromeda ahead, and suddenly, Annabeth comes running in to join Percy. However, they added this scene of Tantalus literally about to shoot Percy and Annabeth down just for attempting to leave camp, and this is not in the book at all. In the book, the enemy they had to escape from were camp harpies, but I guess that's harder to film, so they decided to use Tantalus instead. Tantalus tries to shoot them, but Tyson comes in, knocks off the crossbow out of Tantalus, and runs to Percy and Annabeth. Not gonna lie, I like that they're utilizing more of Tantalus' character, but I also wish that they added the harpy scene, because that would have been so cool to see on screen. But either way, it's pretty much the same, and we end with this cliffhanger of the Princess Andromeda. Like the previous episode, this was also pretty solid. I still don't like the idea of Clarisse choosing Annabeth for the job, but I really like this episode. I'm also rating this a 9.8 out of 10. We got an amazing chariot race scene, we saw Clarisse and Chris's dynamic, and even to the complications in Percy and Annabeth's relationship. It's been a pretty 2 solid episodes so far, and I'm so excited for the next ones. So how about you? What do you think of these episodes so far? Let me know in the comments down below.